On the line with us, our buddy David Pepper, the writer. Once Republicans get a hold of a state, they start messing with the election laws and they start purging voters in ways so that they never lose control of that state. And that certainly seems like what's going on in Ohio. You want to tell? First of all, I'd love to get your thoughts on that concept and how universal it may be. And then secondly, what specifically is your Secretary of State Frank LaRose up to?
Yeah, so you're absolutely right. The gerrymandering is part of it, but the purging of the majority that they are afraid of is a big part of it. And in a closer state, in Ohio, we all know Obama won by a few points in 8 and then 12. Purging of a certain set of voters in certain places can take a state that's winnable and make it hard to win. It can change the mathematics of winning. And when you look closely, and I write about this in both my books, when you look closely at the purging in Ohio, that's what's happened. I mean, the voting population of Cuyahoga County, Cleveland, that's the county that delivered the presidency to Barack Obama both times. Obama lost 87 out of 88 counties to Romney when you added up all 87, but the margin of victory in Cuyahoga County was enough to overcome all that, and he won. That's why Karl Rove was so upset in 2012. He knew it was over. But if you shave away enough of the votes that make up that majority you don't like, it can make a difference. And purging has done that in dramatic ways. I mean, I can show you numbers where even though populations in some cities have fallen, but not nearly as fast as the voting rolls have fallen thanks to purging. They've made mistakes. They have a big error rate. It punishes voters of color and poorer voters, the very coalition they're afraid of. And the thing this week, we had another round of purging on Monday. I'm not in Ohio right now, so I don't have the latest on what happened, but what I was pointing out over the weekend was there looks to be, now we'll see what the actual answers are, but yet again, it looked like in the purging process, there are at least very serious questions about who was on that list and why. Were they following federal law when it came to sort of the requirements that if someone updates their address for driver's licenses, it's supposed to be updated automatically as their address for voting? Some of the language they were using suggested they weren't doing that, so the Brennan Center asked them about that. We'll see, but this is a long history of using an antiquated voting purging process that has dramatically reduced one side of the two sides of Ohio politics. And I don't think it makes Ohio impossible to win, but the path to victory in Ohio now is far more difficult than it was for a Democrat than, let's say, 14 years ago or 12 years ago, because the side that votes for Democrats has been, minimized through all this horrific purging. And they just keep doing it again and again and again.
And we've seen this in state after state. I mean, Brian Kemp, when he was Secretary of State in Georgia and was running for governor against Stacey Abrams, purged 100,000 voters off the voting rolls just before the election and then won by 50,000 votes. Surprise, surprise. Yeah. I mean, they have, they did this in Arizona, they did it in Florida, Texas, Kentucky, or Tennessee, excuse me. There's a bunch of states where purging is like, regular purging of the voting rolls, particularly in black areas. And now that the Supreme Court in, 2016, 2018, legalized caging, sending out postcards and bouncing people when they don't send them back.
That was an Ohio case, and that 5-4 decision allowed it to go to other states. So let's be clear. There are lists that are generated when people move out of a state. It's called the National Change of Address List. So that's a very easy way to track how to keep your rolls clean. Someone moved from Ohio to Florida. Someone moved from, Cleveland to Cincinnati. They need to re-register, etc. There's also lists generated when people pass away. So there are ways to update your rolls on legitimate lists. What happened in that case, and is happening in some states, not all yet, hopefully it stops, but I'm afraid it can grow, they use infrequent voting as their trigger. And then they send a postcard. If someone doesn't respond to a postcard from someone they never heard of or someone they think is a Republican, then after a couple of years, they're off the rolls. It's when you introduce infrequency of voting as the trigger versus someone passed away and is on that list or someone moved is on that list. The infrequency of voting is the problem because a lot of people don't vote. A lot of people may forget to vote, choose not, whatever the reason, they have a right.
Or they just vote in presidential elections. I mean, that's very common.
Right. But the government is saying in Ohio, oh, you didn't vote a couple times in a row. That means in a few years, you may lose the registration entirely, which is a matter of government. Honestly, the government should be doing that.
Right.
Use the list of people that moved, fine. Update the rules accordingly. Find the list of people passed away, go for it. But the infrequent moving is what captures so many more people unnecessarily, leads to all the mistakes, and it ends up meaning that poor people, people who move a lot, African Americans, as you said, they get caught up disproportionately in that part of the purging process.
Right.
That's the problem.
And 5 Republicans on the Supreme Court legalized this after, you know, and with the postcards. I mean, this was called caging back in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and for 30 some odd years, as if my recollection is correct, the Republican Party operated under a court order, a restraining order, preventing them from doing caging. And then the Supreme Court came along and said, oh, no, it's perfectly legal. You can do that.